I leave you in the hands of our next speaker, our respected sister Maryam Amir Brahimi. She received her master's in education from UCLA, where her research was focused on the effects of mentorship rooted in critical race theory for urban high school students of color. Currently, she is pursuing a second bachelor's degree in Islamic studies through Al-Azhar University. Sister Maryam has memorized the Quran and also has a second degree black belt in Taekwondo, mashallah. She travels to work with different communities on topics related to spiritual connections, social issues, and women's studies. She lectures at the Hikmah Institute as well as writes for virtualmosque.com and adjumah.com. I present our next speaker, Sister Maryam Ibrahim.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum. When I was growing up, I wasn't really into Islam, but when I got into it, I started learning about all the ways that I could become righteous and pious, and that was my goal. And in order to do this new phase of life of being close to Allah and staying away from everything that could possibly cause me not to remember Him in every moment, I started changing the way that I was. Nod your head if you've seen someone go through that, or if you yourself have gone through that. Yeah. Okay. Now, when I started changing, people started saying things like, "You're so different. You're kind of weird." People would actually say, "What happened to you?" And one time I went to a movie with my cousins. I had stopped going to movies completely because at that point I decided it's completely inappropriate for a righteous person to go to the movies. That's not the right thing to do with your time. And I finally decided, okay, to build a relationship with my cousins, I will go to this movie. They chose an animated film that was meant for children, for my sake. But I didn't want to waste time while I was there, and because there was going to be music playing in the movie, and at that time, I felt that music was haram, and I didn't accept that there was a difference of opinion. I took headphones with me so I could listen to a lecture during the movie. So I sat in the movie, and of course, it's very, very loud, it's surround sound. So I have my headphones up all the way, and I know my cousins aren't going to know because it's in my hijab and there's no way they're going to see it. And of course I didn't want them to know because the whole point of me going to the theater was to show that I was like them. So we go in and I have my headphones up all the way, and of course there are certain times in the movie when there's complete silence. So like this animated movie, think of like Zootopia or something like way back in the day, Madagascar, something like back in the day with movies and animals. And sorry, like cartoon animals. And so when the movie gets silent, all of a sudden you just hear my headphones blasting a lecture. And my cousin turned to me and she was like, "I can't believe you. Like, I can't believe that this would be so ungodly to you, that you would need to do something else during this moment." Now, other Muslims have told me things like, "MashaAllah, sister, that is true Iman, MashaAllah." But in reality, what that really means is I was so unable to connect to people around me. I had to be so isolated from people around me that in something where I could have made the intention, where our actions are by intention, and Allah knows that my intention is to connect with my relatives, to feel that closest with them on something that's completely halal, to build this relationship for the sake of da'wah, for so many things that He could have rewarded in that moment instead. Out of my attempt to be more righteous, I caused a bigger barrier and a bigger rift between us. These actions that I did, I justified sometimes because I thought that I was fulfilling the hadith, that Islam started as something strange. It's going to come back as something strange. So glad tidings to the strangers. Raise your hand if you've heard that hadith before. Okay, keep it up if you've heard it used in the context of it's okay to be different. Alright, the commentators of that hadith, Sheikh Qawli Iyad, rahimahullah, he mentions that this means that Islam started with a small group of people, eventually it's going to come back as a small group of people. So glad tidings to the strangers, glad tidings to this small group of Muslims. In another narration, the Prophet ﷺ is asked, "Who are the strangers?" And he says, "Those people who do righteousness, who do justice, just work, when other people are doing wrong." There's no those people who are so different from everyone else that people think that they're so weird and strange and can't connect to them. using that hadith to justify why I'm different is not necessarily the meaning of that hadith. What instead the hadith is talking about is being individuals who stand up for righteousness even in times that people are not necessarily standing up for righteousness. And that doesn't necessarily have to look completely strange. There are going to be times that we're different. We are different. But America is supposed to be filled with difference. And there are ways where we can feel like we're a part of the people while still upholding our morality. Now, it's incredible to me that I use that hadith to justify my strangeness when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself in the Quran talks about sending messengers to people speaking the language of their people. And we haven't sent messengers except speaking the language of their people. Now, why would Allah send someone who speaks the language of the people to their own people? Obviously to connect to them. And Imam Tafsir al-Baghawi, he talks about this. Specifically, why would you speak the language of your people? So you can clarify things to people, so people can feel connected to you. If I was speaking in Shakespearean English, thou musteth listeneth to my speecheth. I don't know if I did that right, but how do you feel about that? If I did that the entire time, you might laugh, right? And after a while, you might tune me out. And very likely, you'd eventually leave, especially if I was speaking for a whole hour. But sometimes in our own speech to other people, we are so strange. Like, when you're speaking to someone who isn't Muslim, have you ever done something like, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said to Allah, that's God by the way, subhanahu wa ta'ala. People don't understand what we're saying. It's okay to say God. That's who we all worship. But the point is, Allah sent messengers speaking the language of the people to their people. And he says, قَوْمِهِ, from their people, because he's one of them. The Prophet ﷺ spent 40 years getting to know people before the message was revealed. They got to know his personality. They got to know everything about his family so they could trust who he was before he was given this huge responsibility. So how then us, when we go to work, when we go to school, how should we interact in ways where people can get to know us, appreciate us as individuals so they can then appreciate the beauty of Islam? Someone I know had such incredible character at work that their boss asked him, what is it about you that makes you different? And he said, I'm Muslim. I'm interacting by the rules of Islam. That's just what my religion teaches me. And she said, take me to your religious place because I want to be like you. Just because of his interaction with her, she felt like this is someone I can be like. She wasn't thinking, why is she listening to an Islamic lecture during a cartoon movie? I'm not trying to down that if you do that. May Allah bless you if you do that. Seriously, may Allah accept from me that I did that, but also forgive me because it caused such a rift. But the point is, we can be a part of our culture. And the Prophet ﷺ is himself the biggest demonstrator of this. When we look at the Prophet ﷺ's interaction, we know that he had a number of wives who are mothers of the believers, but none of them are from the Ansar. Does anyone know why? Why are none of our Ummahatul Mu'mineen from the Ansar? Any guesses? So the Prophet ﷺ was asked why he didn't marry any woman of the Ansar, and he said because it's not beloved to their culture. It's not beloved to them for them to marry multiple times like that. And so out of respect for their culture, he didn't even ask someone to marry him. Now, the issue of polygamy is a completely different topic, but the point is, out of respect for their culture, he did not do that particular action. So how can we be people who can interact with our culture in so many different ways, inshallah, that are culturally competent? Number one is loving our own people. So the Prophet ﷺ was asked to curse people, to make dua against other people. And he said, I wasn't sent to be a curser, I was sent to be a mercy. So the first thing is, when we feel overwhelmed with the Islamophobia right now, when we hear of hate crimes on the rise, when we feel afraid sometimes, or hear someone yelling at us, our response shouldn't be to yell back. Of course, I'm a second-degree black belt in karate, alhamdulillah. Self-defense is very important. But at the same time, there are certain times where I don't need to yell back. There was a woman who came into a meeting that we were holding when I was an undergrad at the Muslim Student Association. And she came and she stood after the meeting was over, and myself and another sister who wore hijab were standing there. And she was like, "You wear that crap on top of your head," excuse my language. And my friend was so upset at how offensive her words were. And she responded like, "Oh no, you did not just say that." And I was like, "Calm down, girl. May Allah bless you for your extreme desire to protect Islam." And I like stopped for a second and I was like, "I understand you can feel, it's very, very difficult in this climate." And we just had a conversation. She came back to the meeting the next week and she apologized. And she said, "If you had gone off like your friend did, I wouldn't be back. But you showed me that even in a moment where I'm yelling at you and I'm being offensive, that you as a Muslim can take the higher road." I'm not trying to say like, "Oh, I'm an amazing dai" or anything like that, but I just wanted to give that particular example because there are moments where we can make a choice. Are we going to be like the Prophet ﷺ in Uhud, when there are people who are killing, the Quraysh are killing his loved ones? The Quraysh have done so much to hurt, to inflict pain on people who he cares about so much. The believers are running. He himself is physically hurt. And the Prophet ﷺ, in this particular moment, he could have made dua against anybody, but he said, "Oh Allah, forgive my people because they don't know." People don't know. And it's okay for them to be afraid. We are afraid sometimes. It's okay. We validate that. Now, how can I be someone who can help you understand that Islam is not only a part of our community, but black Muslims who were enslaved built our nation. We are not just a part of our community right now. We have built this nation. May Allah bless our black brothers and sisters for everything that they have done. So if we're a part of this nation, what does that look like? The Prophet ﷺ loves his people. It looks like loving our people. The Prophet ﷺ stood up for justice before he was Muslim. In Half al-Fudul, he took a part of a covenant where they stood up for the rights of people who were oppressed. And after he became a prophet, he said he would have continued to be a part of that even after prophethood. So as Muslims, we know that the Quran encourages us to be a part of social justice. Right now, we have the opportunity more than ever to uphold rights of communities of color, American communities of color, and undocumented people who are in America who are part of communities of color. In our state of California, would you say that Spanish is an important language? Yeah. How many of us speak Spanish? Allahu Akbar, mashallah. I'm so grateful to see that a few hands have gone up. That's incredible. Just as we put our kids in school to learn Arabic, just as we have our kids learn other languages, it's important for us to be a part of the community to learn Spanish. Alhamdulillah, I have a son who I'm so excited about putting into Spanish classes next week, inshallah. He's 9 months old. Since he was born, I was calling him en español. Por favor, quiero mi hijo. Then he goes to your class, and they're like, he has to be 10 months. Finally, he's 9.5 months. I'm like, can you please accept the 9.5 months? But other Muslims have told me, like, oh, that's so weird. Why would you want to learn Spanish? Why don't you put him in, like, Farsi classes? And I'm like, subhanAllah, why wouldn't he need to learn a language where people can feel connected to us? It's so important for us to be a part of the community. This isn't so that I can go in and be like, Islam. This is so that people can see, I'm a part of your community. I care about your rights just like I need you to care about my rights. We're in this together. And I'd love for you to see my character because Islam has made me this person. The good of it, the bad of it's all me. But the good of it, this is Islam. And I want people to love Islam the way that Allah has honored me with loving Islam. Don't we want that for people? The love? And that's what the Prophet ﷺ taught. Creating this love for people, including within our own community. Sometimes being culturally competent isn't about being culturally competent to people outside of the Muslim community. It's being competent to people within our own community. How many people in our own communities have experienced racism and sexism and feeling like they don't belong in our community? That isn't a part of what the Prophet ﷺ established in his Medinan society. Being culturally competent means being able to allow people in our own community to feel like they have a space and feel like they're included and feel loved. Thirdly, we talked about love, we talked about social justice. Thirdly and finally, being creative in the way that we talk to people. There is this thing that a lot of people struggle with, and that's shaking hands. Have any of you struggled with this issue? Raise your hand. This question of like, okay, what do I do if somebody puts their hand out? What if I go to an interview? How does that change? What am I supposed to say? First of all, there's a difference of opinion in terms of shaking hands and whether or not it's allowed. I'm not going to go into the fiqh of it. But if you choose not to shake someone's hand and you believe that that's part of our faith, that's the opinion you follow, and you want to uphold that, may Allah bless you for that, then doing it in a creative way. Has anyone thought of a creative response to somebody who has tried to shake their hand? Or has it like always been awkward? Share something with me. Yes? You say your hands are dirty? What do people say in response to that? Have you ever, you say, okay, so he said, people say, oh, okay. Have you ever had someone say, oh, that's okay? No? Okay, what about you?
My friend always swear that she wear gloves so she can.
So she wears gloves in preparation. Okay, what else? Yeah.
I close my eyes and I put my hand on my heart.
Okay.
And I just, try to avoid the idea of someone, trying to shake my hand. If I see it, I just shake hands and I ask Allah for forgiveness.
Oh, may Allah bless you. Okay, so she's saying she puts her hand on her heart, she kind of closes her eyes, and people kind of get that that's respectful. What about one more idea? What is another thing? Yes?
I think if you keep the distance, it's like saying
Oh, people kind of get it, that there's something going on. Okay. These are great ways of trying to be creative in the dawah, of trying to, feel like we're still connected. Shaking hands in our culture is such a sign of respect and a sign of acceptance. And one of my friends, when we were at the dawah table, this guy came up and he put out his hand to meet us. And she was like, I don't shake hands. And she just left it at that. And I was like, say something a little more than that. And he was like, okay. And then he kind of walked away and he looked so hurt. And I thought, subhanAllah, there are so many opportunities for us to show how beautiful and fun and creative Islam is, even in things that we struggle with. So I need a volunteer who's a male. Yeah, come on up. Yeah, that's you. Bismillah. While we're waiting for him to come up, we're going to say subhanAllah. 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 MashaAllah. Tabarakallah. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Up here. Go ahead. All right. So, let's say he's getting interviewed. What's your name?
Omar.
Okay, so Omar's going to interview me. So I know I have an interview with Omar. I know that I have to shake someone's hand. Now, if I follow the opinion that I shouldn't shake someone's hand, I could definitely go with any of those wonderful ideas. Or I could just take a massive chocolate bar. And I could take this chocolate bar, and when I go into my meeting, and you stick out hands, because that's what we're going to do, and I go, it's very nice to meet you. What is your reaction right now? Why, right?
Yeah.
Because in Islam, we believe in professional interactions, and we believe in spreading chocolate. I love your chocolate. And in my religion, we value professional interactions between genders. And I would love to share some chocolate with you instead of my hand. How do you feel about that?
Confused.
But, are you willing to learn more?
Sure.
This is an excellent example of how it could go wrong. But, it could also go right. Thank you. I would still give this to you, but I borrowed it from someone else. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Bill, let's all up. I would have given it to you, I'm so sorry. That felt terrible. But the point is that you could be creative in the way that we are part of society. And there are times that people might react to that and be like, that's really strange. But there are also times that people might be like, wow, I'd love to learn more about you. And you were so creative in that problem, I'd like to hire you too. So the point is that Islam has given us so many opportunities to be a part of people, to help us feel like we are part of the community. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us a verse that I think you might know, that has to do with nations and tribes. Does anyone know it? I want to share it. I can't hear all of you at once.
So you may know one another?
Sorry?
So you may know one another?
Yes! That Allah has created us in nations and tribes so that we may know one another. That's one of the reasons He created our differences. So if we are part of our society and there are so many differences in our society, how can we fulfill this worship of Allah, this Quranic injunction? We can do creative, we can be creative in the way that we interact with people. We can stand up for social justice for communities that need social justice as we do, and we can love the people that are around us as the Prophet ﷺ loved his people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, He has chosen you. If he has chosen you, as Tabari says, it means he specifically chose you to be a part of this ummah. If he chose you to be a part of this ummah, there's a wisdom behind it. What is that wisdom? Why did he choose you to be a part of it? Find out what we're passionate about, figure out how we can use it in our society, and inshallah through that we can help revolutionize our society from being a place where people see us as strange to really being Tuba lil Ghuraba, where we are people who create spaces of morality, spaces of social justice, spaces of love, where people are suffering and people need that type of solidarity. Barakallahu fikum for your time. It's a pleasure to be here. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for your attention. We're going to open the floor. If you have questions, if you can go to the center, and I will walk out there with the microphone. We'll leave the microphone here. I just wanted to share about the handshaking, by the way. I live in an area of Orange County called Little Saigon. It's the largest community of Vietnamese people outside of Vietnam, and it is against their culture for men and women to shake hands. And they do the exact same thing. They put their hand on their heart and they do this little bow thing. Of course, the younger generation does what Americans do, but the folks who are more traditional don't shake hands. So we're not the only ones with that practice. If you have questions, we can line up out there, and I'll walk over there with the microphone. Or if you want to speak really loudly, we'll repeat it for the mic. We have a mic on the floor already? Awesome.
So, as a mother, I'm trying to engage in society, and I usually go to my son's school, public school, and I volunteer in that school as a homeroom mom, and I do help with PTA as well. Teacher Association. Now sometimes I'm put in a situation where there's a gray area, sometimes let's say Halloween, and of course for my son it's the same thing. When it was the custom parade at school, I made him absent of that day. So there are times where we want to really be active in the society. At the same time, the culture is mixed, with other things that are completely away from our Islamic values. This is where we have the confusion for me as a mother, and even for the kids. Could you please explain?
Sure. That's a really important question. So first of all, myself, when I got into Islam, I believed that there were certain opinions for everything, and I followed those particular opinions, and I thought that was the only way. But a lot of the issues that we ourselves are hesitant in interacting in, there's actually differences of opinion itself. And sometimes it's better to take a different opinion for that situation. Now, Halloween in particular, differences of opinion aside, if I choose not to participate and I don't want my children to participate in it, it's so important for me, it's so beautiful the way you asked it, is how can I find a way to explain it to people and provide an alternative for people? So let's say I'm not going to be involved in planning a Halloween parade for the children's school, but I can head planning a different type of parade. Maybe I can create a cultural awareness day on campus and ask if, on the elementary school, and ask if other teachers and students would be comfortable, parents would be comfortable having teachers and students participate in showing something about themselves or their culture, creating something new. So the point is, one, providing an alternative for other people so that I am part of everything, but there are certain things that out of my faith I don't participate in. Here is why, give an explanation. If people don't understand that explanation, I'm happy to explain more, or I'm happy to meet with you at another time. Or sometimes we don't have an explanation that's going to work for people, and that's okay. Nobody has to understand necessarily accept my explanation. This is out of respect for me and out of respect for you. We're going to live our lives differently, and that's fine. I'm just going to be respectful of your differences. You're going to be respectful of my differences. How are other ways I can participate? And especially for children, providing them with opportunities to feel like they can have so much fun as well. So, I mean, like I mentioned, I just had a baby, alhamdulillah, so I can't speak on the parenting part of this because I haven't gone through it. But I can say that I have worked with a number of Muslim youth And a lot of times there's this feeling of feeling left out. There are so many holidays in America, mashallah. And if I choose not to follow all of those holidays, except like even the non-religious holidays, then there's so many opportunities to feel left out. So what are other ways I can allow my child to be surrounded with good friends, Muslim or not Muslim, who can celebrate with that child and who can uphold a certain type of morality, but celebrate the uniqueness of that particular identity? Did that answer the question? Yeah, kind of?
I just want to
Yeah.
make a comment as a parent.
Sure.
about it.
Can you stand up? Can someone bring the mic? Because I'm not sure if everyone can hear you.
Just I want to make a comment on the sister's questions about as a parent. And I have a 13-year-old and 9-year-old as a parent, what I did when I enrolled them in the school. Very first kindergarten, it was the Ramadan. And I make a point that I want to come and talk about our holidays. So I went in and, graciously enough, they want to know more about it, what is the Muslims and what they celebrate. So I make a tradition. So each Ramadan I go, read a story, talk about what is Ramadan, what our beliefs are. I take some dates and some goodies for the kids. And as soon as the main holiday, which is our Eid, comes, I make a big deal out of it. So I know my kids doesn't go to school, and everybody knows why they're absent. And then I make a very big deal out of it, like how they make a big deal out of Christmas. So I make a big deal out of at home, when my kids go and talk to their friends how much they had fun, what they did. And I emphasize my kids too much about it that they brag about their holidays. So all their friends, now my 13-year-old, she's in 8th grade, each and every students in their school, they know they are Muslims, they only eat halal. They only celebrate only 2 holidays. So when they have a Thanksgiving, recently, they make sure that she will be celebrate Thanksgiving, but she can have her own food, which is halal cheese pizza or whatever. So as a parent, I involve so much. I go to each field trip. I go to take them to wherever they need it in the school, PTA or whatever they need the help. I be there. So entire staff and everybody knows who we are, and they respect so much. And as soon as they, because I'm the only hijabi there initially. Now, alhamdulillah, I have a few parents. They are hijabis too. But I set the stage as soon as they are in the kindergarten. And that's, I always say that, alhamdulillah, now, last year my daughter was in 7th grade. But I did not wait for her to come to 7th grade to talk about Islam, because Islam is another curriculum in 7th grade. So I started way early, even though my daughter was not even 7th grade. So I volunteered myself, go into the class and just, presentation. So I teach about Islam.
Okay, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, mashallah. Very specific points that I think any parent can consider.
And it's doable.
Thank you. Very, very, very nice advice. Thank you.
My question is related to much of the discussion today about cultural competence, and yesterday also that we need to reduce culture around this. So part of the cultural competence, this is to piggyback off this question too, is especially in LA, the LGBTQ community, and in universities, specific majors. We know the Islamic stance on homosexuality, but then you have to deal with people around you. They add you as Facebook friends, and they make assumptions about you adding them on Facebook or dealing with them in the work settings, and we sometimes feel hypocritical. At one point I know my Muslim stance on this issue, and at the same time they are assuming things about me and my religion that are not the case by my friendly encounter with them. So I'm sort of conflicted on how to deal with this cultural issue.
That's a very important one. And I'm going to share with you what I personally do. That doesn't necessarily mean this is all of the discussion on LGBTQ or homosexuality in Islam. So I want everyone to know that there might be differences of opinion. There might be, people might feel comfortable doing one thing after another. That's okay. For me, the first thing is that the feeling of being attracted to someone of the same sex is not something that will hold accountable for things, as long as we don't act upon them, except things that come as thoughts, right? As long as we don't sit and like dwell on them, like for example, if somebody sat and just really, God forgive me for saying this, but like thinking about someone else in that way, and just sat and did that intentionally, not just having a feeling, but intentionally thought about that for a long time, or acted upon it. So the point is that the feeling is the issue, right? There are Muslims who struggle with feelings of same-sex attraction. And as a community, it's important for us to recognize that that does not take a person out of Islam, and the action is the sin. And there's always tawbah, which is coming back to Allah. Now, when it comes to looking at it, homosexuality, the action as a sin, look at not believing in God. Like, look at the Quraysh. The Quraysh were physically fighting the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and yet he still invited them, and yet he still worked with them. And he said, like we just mentioned for the covenant of justice that the Prophet was a part of, these are people who don't believe in God, who worship they believe in God, but they worship multiple gods. They do so much, they oppress women. There's so many immoral actions that they were part of. And yet the Prophet said if they called him to be a part of it, he still would have been a part of it as a prophet. So the point is that we can work with people of other sexual orientations on issues of social justice, on issues of being good to people. Not believing in God is so much greater of an issue than having a same-sex attraction. And when it comes to interacting with someone, finding someone on Facebook, actually maybe working with them in school or at work, there's a difference between I'm going to openly support your lifestyle choices if you choose to be in a relationship with someone of the same sex, versus I'm here as somebody who works with you, as somebody who's a student with you, as somebody who can even potentially be a friend. There are people who are part of the LGBTQ community who are incredible allies to the Muslim community. And that doesn't mean if I'm going to friend you on Facebook that I support every action or every lifestyle decision you've made. Just like if they friend you on Facebook, that doesn't mean that they support that of you either. I think there's a common understanding that there are going to be, specifically with the LGBTQ issue, there are going to be a lot of people of faith who don't agree with that specific lifestyle. But that doesn't mean I'm going to denounce you as an individual. I'm not going to treat you any less well or be a part of or have an issue in our relationship if just because I disagree with that particular action. But I can also bring up if I'm asked, would you support me, or how do you feel about this? I can say this is what my faith teaches me. But at the same time, unless we're talking about a Muslim who's struggling with this and asking, because that's a different conversation, they're not Muslim in the first place, so they don't have to abide by Islam's laws. So just for me, I put it into context. Looking at, worshiping God is the most important thing. I would like everyone to know Allah. And if I'm not going to interact with people based on their sexual identity or their sexual attraction, sexual identity, again, a whole other discussion, I should have said sexual attraction, then how can I expect people who have same-sex attraction to even want to know about Islam? There are people who convert to Islam who have same-sex attraction. And there are people who come to Islam and afterwards choose not to live in a same-sex marriage because of becoming Muslim. So how can I denounce all of these things because I'm concerned about whether or not this is appropriate? It's important to feel whether or not it's appropriate. It's a great question. Allah bless you. And I so appreciate that you're like, how do I be true to Islam and also show that I don't agree with this lifestyle? I think it's important to put things into context and to recognize that just because I am a great, just because I'm respectful, we're respectful of one another, and we are allies of one another, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to agree on every part of our lifestyles, and it doesn't mean we're necessarily going to stand up for every single part of our different lifestyles. Again, that's specific to dealing with a non-Muslim who's going through that. If it's a Muslim, that's a different conversation. But I hope I answered your question, inshallah. Does anyone else have another question? Go ahead. Yeah.
My question is about in reference to cultural competency and cultural awareness. Who do you feel is responsible to ensuring schools or the community is teaching an anti-violence education?
Are you talking about like in messages giving like sermons or like in the Islamic school, like what specifically? Just the community in general?
Just the community in general.
I think that's a really important question. I've definitely been through conferences where I walk out or I listen to something and I'm like, that just sounds so cultural. Not American cultural. I mean like, that just sounds so Arab. Or that just sounds so Desi. Or that just sounds so Persian. Like that's not necessarily all of Islam or how American Muslim, that's not necessarily Islamic injunction. That might be part of my cultural practice. So I think it's important for us to recognize that the Muslim community specifically, we are so diverse. And specifically, now bless you, like the Black community, we need to hear, we need our spaces of power in the Muslim community, the imamships, places on conferences, to give us insight into how to be an indigenous Muslim, just as so many Black Muslims have been. I think that's part of a huge rhetoric that's missing in our community. And we have a huge, I think we have a huge issue with racism in our community. Now, I'm not trying to make this all about being Black, but I just did that. That's not what I was trying to do. But I personally have, this is something I've struggled with, where I'm not Arab and I'm not Desi. And I've always felt isolated because of that, because I feel like the message becomes cultural. So how can we make it uncultural? I feel like it's important for people who do have that cultural bias to be upfront with it and to say, recognize that this is something coming from my cultural experience. Additionally, it's important for us to have indigenous Muslims, whether Black, Native American, Muslims come and be places of privilege in our community to help us learn through the struggles of our indigenous Muslims, how can we be a part of our American narrative? And also, recognizing that, we are not a monolith when it comes to culture. And so if somebody is saying something and that's fine for that culture, that applies to that culture, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for another one. But we have a shared American identity. So how can we look at getting to sorry, I'm stumbling through words because even within the American community, there's just so much diversity. I don't think I'm answering your question. I'm going in a lot of circles. But would you like to share what you think? I would love to hear your response. Sorry?
Okay, close to answer my question.
Thank you for your validating my struggle, my attempt.
Before we go to the next question, because I think this topic was touched on the last, some of the prior comments, I'm going to put a plug in for one of the conference's sponsors, the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California. It's a program called Muslim Speakers Network. Their booth is right outside. Up in Northern California, we have the Islamic Speakers Bureau, and across the country, there's been Muslims who, as individuals or through groups, have provided education through the school system. Specific to the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California, the ISB is certified by the school district. They actually has provided hundreds of hours of training to LAUSD school teachers who receive credits for attending cultural sensitivity programs by the ISB speakers. The ISB speakers are certified to speak in public schools, and that's really critical because it is against the law of the United States, or it's against the Constitution, to proselytize in public school setting. You can't preach. You can't do straight up what we call da'wah in public schools. So one of the ways that we test our cultural competence is being able to deliver information, educational information, properly, culturally contextualized to public school students. And if you don't know, Islam, as was mentioned, is covered in the public school curriculum in California in the 7th and 8th grade, typically in the months of October, November, and the first part of December. So this is actually high season for those presentations. See more about them out the booth. There was one more question, I think. We have time for a few more.
Can you share with us advice on different priorities that can help us as a community be better engaged with Muslim circles, especially post-election?
Thank you so much. That's such an important question. And I think the example I gave earlier, where I went to a movie theater listening to a lecture, I think is a great example of a lack of understanding of the priorities. Sometimes our community might be so focused in detail or something very minor in the bigger picture. And it's important for us to look at, okay, what, especially, post-election, and recognizing the reality of the changes that might come in the United States, where should we be involved in? And I think questions like, can I be involved with the LGBTQ community? Can I be involved in certain communities if they don't necessarily uphold all of my moral distinctions as a Muslim? Looking and seeing how as a Muslim I can actually be involved and work with other communities so that I can help provide that type of security, not only for myself but others as well. And also, how can I use fiqh in a way that can help me become someone who's comfortable in my skin? You know, the Sahaba, they were so easy because they knew. The Prophet ﷺ, when he was given two options, he would take the easier option as long as it was halal. And so for us, I think, at least for myself, before I knew much about Islam, but I wanted to be the best Muslim I could, I was very rigid and very uncompromising because I thought that's what Islam expected of me. Learning about where my priorities should be and how my intentions should be made when I go into certain situations really helped me recognize that Allah knows our situation as Muslims in America, and He recognizes that the efforts that we're making as Muslims in America are sometimes going to put us in positions where we might put something higher than something else, even though someone from the outside who's a scholar might think that's not going to work. That's Islamically not the best decision. But the point is, we know our situation, and we know that sometimes that is the best decision for that space. So making that decision, though, requires knowledge. So I would invite everyone to find a mentor and start working with that mentor. Go through a book. Ask one of your local scholars if you can speak to that person about how you can look at the fiqh of priorities in your own life and come with specific situations and be mentored by that person, so that over time, inshallah, it'll become easier for you to make those decisions in that moment with knowledge, and then be an advocate for other people to start learning as well, and putting yourself in a position where you can teach the greater community about it, inshallah. Thank you so much.
So, Sister Maryam, firstly, I just wanted to say Jazakallah because a lot of your writing, especially a specific article in mine about rethinking Muslim women, where you tell your story, some of which you shared with us today, but about the story of coming to a greater commitment to Islam, but coming to it maybe in the presence of people who practice Islam in a way that was so rigid that made you really lose your identity to some extent. And then you explaining how that wasn't part of, really connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and growing in your faith. I forwarded that to so many young women. And the question that I want to ask is a question that I have heard sort of on behalf of younger Muslim women who are often told, maybe just by their community, that they cannot have a confident, outspoken personality as a Muslim woman and still be practicing the haya and modesty that is really a beautiful part of our faith. In trying to explain to them that the two are not in contradiction, I often forward your articles or messages that feel okay to me, and bless you. But I was wondering if maybe just for the benefit of all of us, you could share a couple of points. I think I'm actually the last question, but a couple of points about how there is no contradiction there, that we can maintain our haya and still be confident Muslim women engaged and involved in our community.
Thank you so much. Really important question. It's a struggle that's very real to a lot of sisters. The message that I think a lot of our community provides is, for women, the greatest thing in the world, the most important thing is modesty, and also marriage and motherhood. And those three M's are the most important part of our identities that we need to celebrate. And if we don't fit in one of those molds, then that's, we haven't fulfilled the greatest piece of our identity. But really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us that, yes, motherhood is so important, and marriage is so important, modesty in those two are so important, but He's told us that our purpose in life is to worship Him. And that looks like worshiping Him to the best of my ability within the guidelines of Islam. We don't have a model of a woman who is the perfect Muslim woman that looks like someone who doesn't use her voice. Maryam alayhi salam in the Quran, when a man appears in her mihrab, she doesn't run away. She stands with firmness and she's assertive. And she says, I seek refuge with Ar-Rahman from you. So she's seeking refuge with Ar-Rahman from this man. And subhanAllah, she uses her voice with such strength and conviction. And that is the most modest person that we have as an example. We have the examples of Aisha radiallahu anha, who, subhanAllah, not only was a scholar battle, like Nasira, the Prophet ﷺ talked about seeing her from his right, from his left, just he was protecting her everywhere. And he didn't say, and that was only from her. She was the only Muslim woman who could ever do that in time. She's an example for Muslim women. In order to be in a space of battle, you can't be shy, you can't run away, you can't not use your voice. You have to be firm. And subhanAllah, Allah created our personalities in certain ways, and He didn't create our personalities so that we can fight with ourselves and say, okay, you know, Allah created me outgoing, and therefore for the rest of my life, in order to be pious, I'm just going to try my best never ever to talk to anyone. That's what I did. It's psychologically damaging to feel like you can't be Muslim and be yourself. Islam didn't come to mute our personalities. It came so that we can use the qualities that Allah has blessed us with for His sake. There are so many examples in our seerah of women who give lectures in front of men, like the students of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullah alayhi, Fatima al-Baghdadiyya. She would stand in the masjid of Damascus and she would give the sermon on the minbar. Now she wouldn't give Jama'ah. I'm not saying the Friday khutbah. She didn't give the Friday khutbah. But she would give lectures in front of men and women not wearing the niqab on the minbar of the masjid of Damascus. And she was a student of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullah alayhi. So we have examples in our history of women who are not afraid or not shy about practicing Islam. Salama. I mean, this is okay. If you have a younger child, I'm just gonna, for the sake of this being a community discussion, I'm just gonna say she was in a certain physical state that women get sometimes in the masjid, and it's the state that she could still pray. And she would stand in the masjid with a tray underneath her. In the masjid of the Prophet, this is in Bukhari. And she would stand there and men would see that. She would still come to the masjid to pray. This is to make i'tikaf, it's an extra salah. And she would come, subhanAllah, knowing that men are going to see her because there's no barrier. And so why am I sharing just a few of the massive references of this? Because the message we receive is that it's not necessarily modest to have a loud voice. It's not modest to be assertive. It's not modest to be dynamic. Modesty is not in not being all of these things. Modesty is in having humility, dressing in a modest way, interacting in a respectful way, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I can still be assertive and dynamic and still be modest. There's no opposition between those two. And how do I see examples of that? In the Sahabiyat themselves. May Allah bless all of them. Jazakallah khair for your question. I hope that I answered that.
Jazakallah khair, Maryam, for allowing the question and answer session and your beautiful talk, mashallah. And thank you, Brother Yaman, for moderating this session. Inshallah.